I've pretty much dealt with most of the enemies for the water room sequence in Resident Evil 4 OG, but the remake version takes forever to do, and because of Ashley's crappy AI and the fact that she has so much trouble staying close to Leon, you cannot speed up the water room sequence of Resident Evil 4 Remilk. So this first part to the water room sequence is going to take an eternity to do for Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And also look at Ashley, by the way, in Resident Evil 4 OG. You see how she's staying behind me at all times? Why is it so hard for the developers of Resident Evil 4 Remilk to program in a proper AI system that follows you constantly and doesn't just dilly-dally or just wiggle all over the place and have so much trouble catching up to you? It doesn't make any sense that the 2005 game could be so much better mechanically than the 2023 game. And look at this. On Resident Evil 4 OG, I've gotten past the enemies right here, so once I get to the door, the enemies are going to reset and they'll be frozen, and I can deal with less enemies in the process. Whereas in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, I'm still dealing with the first couple of enemies. And again, I have to deal with them in this part right here because I can't deal with those enemies with the crossbowmen around. And who would have thought the developers looked back at the 2005 version of Resident Evil 4 and thought, there wasn't enough crossbowmen, let's add a bit more just to drag out the sequence.
I'm fine.
Unlike new Capcom, who designed Resident Evil 4 Remilk, old Capcom does not remove checkpoints arbitrarily for a very long Resident Evil game, and they actually use the checkpoints in such a way as to bypass really dumb sequences. So by restarting the checkpoint, those previous enemies have despawned, and I can focus all of my attention on defending Ashley. And as you can still see, on Resident Evil 4 Remilk, I am still getting rid of all of these enemies because, again, they will screw me because of Ashley's crappy AI, and because they will overwhelm me with their numbers. So yeah, you're just having to drag the sequence out for way longer than necessary because they put way too many enemies. And it just goes to show that even when you supposedly make your gameplay a lot more complex and add some interesting mechanics like knife executions and the like, if you place the enemies incorrectly and you add too many of them, you're just going to cause the gameplay to be very stale and mundane. Doesn't matter how mechanically complex your game is, you can still make a very stale and repetitive experience anyway. It's quite cool in Resident Evil 4 OG, being able to use the physics engine and the direction you're aiming to knock enemies into the water. It's an opportunity for the player to get experimental and clever, contributing to more player investment with a section and the mechanics at play. It also allows the player to be very smart when saving up on ammunition, and it makes the section less tedious. Nothing like that exists in the Water Room area of Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and I think it says a lot when the developers of Resident Evil 4 Remilk allow the player to go back to the merchant in the middle of the section. With how accessible the merchant is during this part, it's no wonder why there is so much more laziness present during the sequence, with how they've placed the enemies, how they've added more enemies than before, and with how the general gameplay flows. You probably also noticed that Ashley in Resident Evil 4 OG is significantly better in design compared to her Resident Evil 4 Remilk counterpart for the double crank sequence. She does not stand around and wait for enemies to grab her when they get within 3 feet of her. She is entirely focused on turning the cranks, which allows the section to not feel like a carnival of stupidity. Also, whenever the enemies grab onto Ashley in Resident Evil 4 OG, it only takes one shot from any weapon, regardless of distance, to make them drop her. That's called common sense, something that was lacking with how the developers designed so much of Resident Evil 4 Remilk. In Resident Evil 4 Remilk, even with high-powered weapons like the sniper rifle, it can take almost 2 to 4 shots to make enemies drop her. They're not defending themselves. They're not focused on you. It makes absolutely no sense how the hit reaction works with the enemies. How can they avoid being flinched despite being entirely complacent to Leon shooting them? It only adds more to the poor designs present during the double crank sequence in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and they put way too many enemies during the double crank sequence of Resident Evil 4 Remilk. At this point, this first part to the Water Room area of Resident Evil 4 Remilk is dragging on for way longer than necessary. Again, why do they have to put this many enemies during the sequence? Why do they have to put so many crossbow guys? I'm having to resort to this kind of methodology, with just falling back to this previous room and relying upon exploits to punish the enemies when they decide to run away. Even with weapons like the riot gun and the sniper rifle, it doesn't change what this sequence is, and you're still going to be using the same methods if you want to get through this in a very practical, optimized route. Although I'm sure the vast majority of people will just try to run past it and take all the damage. But such an approach does not properly convey how badly designed the entire Water Room area is for Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And as you can see right here, I'm having to fall back to the merchant. I'm selling stuff just so I can repair my knife. And then eventually I'm going to buy the sniper rifle right over here. and I'm having to waste time arranging my inventory and removing any unnecessary stuff so I can make room for the sniper rifle, and it's not going to make that much of a difference for the upcoming sequence involving the double cranks. That's another thing that drags out the sequence. A vast majority of the enemies on this bottom level of the water room area can turn into plagas, and plagas on this game have so much life, they're very resilient to a lot of flinch animations, which makes absolutely no sense for this kind of fleshy, fragile enemy, and they also have a lot of range on their attacks. The culmination of these aspects really force the player to not deal with any plagas, and it only adds more incentive to use this exploit to allow me to shoot the enemies in the leg when they're running, and then follow up with a knife execution, and therefore this causes me to go back to the merchant a lot in order to repair my knife durability. And also, with the absurd amount of ammunition that you need for the double crank sequence of Resident Evil 4 Remilk, this is what also contributes to me using this exploit, because I need to stay up on a lot of ammo, so therefore I have to use a lot of knife executions, and you get the main gist of it. Yet again, another example why this sequence is so badly designed on so many levels compared to the original version of Resident Evil 4, which was already bad enough as it was, but at least there are some positives to take away from the water room area of Resident Evil 4 OG compared to this irredeemable section of Resident Evil 4 Remilk.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Awesome.
We're not out of the woods yet.
platform?
A little over the top, don't you think?
I've got some new items. Welcome. Got some rare things on sale, stranger. Let us know when you've made some room. Suit it. Welcome. Wish your enemies sweet dreams from afar, with a bullet straight through. Don't get yourself killed now.
There's gotta be a way to get out there.
This way.
Okay.
Time for the carnival of stupidity to commence.
You gonna be okay?
Yeah, I got this.
I'll cover you. Don't stop. Be careful.
Leon!
Look at that bullcrap right there. There is no logic to why this enemy is this resistant to sniper rifle shots while she's carrying away Ashley. She's not defending herself. She's being entirely complacent to Leon. It makes absolutely no sense. And look, Ashley is just sitting there because she's just waiting for enemies to grab her. The programming on Ashley's cowering mechanic is so egregious and so badly designed. And look, she's still standing there. There's no one behind her. Ashley, why don't you run away and actually go for the switch and let me defend you? You're allowing the enemies to cluster together and get even more chances to slow you down, and even more chances for me to waste my ammo so that I'm forced to reload my weapon or seek other means of getting ammunition. I genuinely cannot believe that this entire section was given the status gold for release. They actually thought this section was worthy of inclusion in the final product version of Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And this is how messy the gameplay can be, because the poor designs are putting pressure upon me, because they couldn't design a better section. Screw you, Ashley. Just screw you. And screw the developers of this supposed remake of Resident Evil 4. All they've done is just make a pre-alpha that just milks on fan nostalgia, and that's all it takes to deliver a final product, apparently. Rather than actually refining your core designs better, rather than actually designing more interesting gameplay scenarios, rather than actually removing poor designs entirely. Oh dear lord, this is of a new level of incompetency, as I've said a million times, with this pre-alpha of a Resident Evil game.